Before you close your eyes and drift into the shadows of sleep, take a second to like this video. It tells me you want more tales that creep under your skin. Leave a comment if something in the story gave you chills, or if you've ever heard 3 knocks in the night. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might be darker, deeper, and waiting just for you. Sleep well, if you can. They told me the night shift would be quiet, easy even, just me, and a clipboard making sure the inventory lined up with the manifests. But they left out the part about the rules that sounded more like urban legends than real workplace policies, and yet were recited with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for funeral rites. It was my second day on the job, and already I could feel something was off. Not the kind of off you chalk up to a weird coworker or too much caffeine, but something deeper, heavier, like the warehouse itself had a pulse buried somewhere beneath the concrete floors. My name's Joel, 29, divorced, broke, and at the time, grateful for any job that paid me under the table with no questions asked. The warehouse was on the edge of town, tucked behind an abandoned rail line and ringed by decaying chain-link fences, overgrown with ivy and God knows what else. It had no name on the building, just a black placard with an address and an old keypad gate that groaned when it opened. Inside, the place looked exactly like what you'd expect. Rows and rows of towering shelves stacked with boxes labeled in cryptic shorthand, humming fluorescent lights that flickered just a little too much, and a clock above the loading dock that always seemed 5 minutes behind, no matter how many times you reset it. On my first night, my supervisor, a quiet guy named Rick, with bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept since 1992, handed me a laminated sheet titled Third Shift Protocols. I laughed at first, thought it was a joke, or maybe some outdated safety thing, until I saw the way Rick looked at me when I asked what it was. "You follow these," he said, his voice low and tight, "and don't ask questions. That's how people keep their jobs around here." I shrugged and skimmed the list, expecting nonsense, but it felt more like a page torn from a horror movie script than company policy. It read, 1. Do not answer knocks on any warehouse door after 2:13 a.m., no matter how many times they knock. 2. If you hear breathing from aisle 9, do not investigate, leave the aisle immediately, and avoid eye contact with anything you might see. 3. Forklift number 13 is not to be operated, moved, or touched under any circumstances. 4. If the power flickers 3 times in a row, clock out and go home, even if your shift isn't over. 5. If you find anything on the floor that wasn't there before, do not pick it up, especially if it looks like it's breathing. At first, I thought it was some elaborate hazing ritual. Maybe every new guy got this creepy sheet, and everyone had a laugh about it over beers the next week. I tried to joke with the other workers, but most didn't even make eye contact. The ones who did just shook their heads and walked away. By the time midnight rolled around, the warehouse emptied out almost entirely, except for me and a guy named Benny, who spent most of the shift chain smoking outside the dock door and muttering to himself. "Just keep your head down," he told me when I pressed him about the rules. "It ain't worth finding out what happens when you don't." I tried to brush it all off. I mean, come on, forklifts don't drive themselves, and no one actually believes in haunted aisles. Still, something about the tone in Benny's voice lingered with me like static you can't quite tune out. The first few hours of my shift passed uneventfully. I spent them checking pallets and making small notes, the kind of brain-numbing routine that makes you forget what time it is. I had earbuds in one ear, low-volume lo-fi to keep me calm, and was halfway through my checklist when I noticed the first oddity, a single knock at the back door. At first, I assumed it was Benny, maybe locked out or playing a prank, but when I went to check, he was still outside, standing under the yellow sodium light, staring dead ahead at the cornfield behind the fence. I called out, but he didn't answer, just slowly shook his head without turning around. That's when the second knock came, then the third, then 5 more, one after another, each louder and more deliberate, like someone knew I was just inside and was growing impatient. I checked the time. 2:12 a.m. Something about that time made my skin crawl. The knock came again, 3 sharp, rhythmic thuds, like a fist the size of a dinner plate hammering wood. My hand hovered over the door handle, and I swear I felt a chill radiating from the metal, like it had been dragged through ice. I remembered the rule, do not answer knocks after 2:13, and stepped back, heart hammering, my brain ping-ponging between common sense and an overwhelming sense of wrongness. I backed away from the door and turned back toward the shelves, but then the power flickered once, then again. I froze. A third flicker never came, but the shadows cast by the emergency lighting seemed to shift slightly, stretching longer than they should, bending around corners where light shouldn't even reach. I heard Benny yell from outside, "Don't answer it, Joel." I hadn't told him my name. He wasn't even near the door. I spun back around but saw nothing through the reinforced window, just blackness. The knock had stopped. I tried to collect myself, told myself I was just tired, maybe even dreaming standing up, but as I turned back toward the shelves, my clipboard slipped from my hands and landed with a dull thud. I bent to pick it up, and beside it on the concrete floor was something I hadn't seen before, something soft, pale, and moving. It looked like a folded piece of cloth at first, but as I leaned in, I realized it was pulsing slightly, like it was breathing. That's when I remembered Rule 5. My spine went cold. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes locked on it, and bumped into the edge of the nearest shelf. Boxes teetered, one falling and bursting open to reveal dozens of small porcelain dolls, all staring upward, none of which had been listed in the manifest. My breathing grew shallow, and I fumbled for the flashlight at my hip. I flicked it on and swept the beam across the warehouse. In the distance down aisle 9, I saw something move. It wasn't walking. It wasn't crawling. It was sliding, slow and unnatural, like a shadow that had freed itself from the wall and decided to learn how to hunt. I heard it then, too, that breathing. Wet, hoarse, heavy, and impossibly deep, like lungs filled with mud. I stepped back, flashlight shaking in my grip, when I heard my name whispered low and intimate, as if the sound had bypassed my ears entirely and wormed its way directly into my skull. Joel. I turned and ran, knocking over boxes and tripping over cables, desperate to get back to the office. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed into the corner, pulling the metal chair in front of me, like it would somehow protect me from whatever was out there. The clock on the wall ticked to 2:13 a, and then the knocking started again, this time on the office door. Soft, patient, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. It never did. Eventually, the knocking stopped, and I sat there until sunrise, unable to sleep, unable to think, just counting the seconds until the others returned. When Rick walked in at 6:01 a.m., he didn't ask what happened. He looked at me, looked at the office door, and said, "You made it through your first real night. Don't break the rules, Joel. They're not there for you. They're there for it." And then he walked away. I never told anyone what I saw, or what I almost did. I still work here, still follow every rule to the letter. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the door. And worse, what if one night I don't have a choice? I told myself I wasn't going back down aisle 9. Not after that first night. Not after the breathing and the shadow that moved like it had never learned to walk like us. But somehow I found myself staring into that dark corridor again, flashlight trembling in my hand, the beam flickering like it was afraid too. And I kept thinking about How Rick had said the rules weren't there for me. They were there for it. And that thought just looped over and over in my head like a broken tape, replaying every time my boots touched the warehouse floor. Something had changed after that night, not just in how I saw the place, but in how it saw me. Like now that I'd heard the knocks and didn't open the door, it wanted to test what else I'd obey, what I might be tempted to break next. The warehouse felt different, heavier, like every time I passed through the rows of shelves, I was walking deeper into something alive, something ancient that had learned how to wear concrete and fluorescent lights like a mask. The next few shifts passed in a dull fog, but the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was charged, humming, like static crawling just beneath the surface of my skin, and I couldn't ignore the way Aisle 9 seemed to follow me even when I wasn't near it. How my flashlight would always dim when I was even 2 aisles over. How every time I glanced at the security monitors in the back office, Aisle 9 would be just a little darker than the rest, no matter how many bulbs were replaced. Benny stopped showing up to work 2 nights after the knock incident, and when I asked Rick about it, he just said, "Benny's on extended leave," without blinking, like he'd rehearsed it. I didn't press further. I didn't want to know. But the worst part was when I noticed the door to Aisle 9, yes. The aisle has a door, one of those swinging industrial ones with the clear plastic flaps, was always ajar no matter how many times I closed it. And one night, when I went to finally check the manifest for that section, I saw something scratched into the metal frame at the top of the door. "Do not look at I.T." Not typed, not labeled, scratched in, with something jagged and strong enough to carve through steel. And it was fresh. That was the first night I heard the breathing again. Not distant this time, not echoing faintly from deep within the shelves, but right there, a few feet in, just past the doorway. So close I could hear the wet drag of each inhale, followed by a low rattle, like something dying was trying to imitate the sound of life. I stood frozen, my flashlight held against my chest like a crucifix, beam aimed down at the floor, because I didn't want to see anything. Not yet, because if the rule was don't look at it, then looking meant it looked back, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if that happened, something would come unbound. I backed away slowly, my boots squeaking on the polished concrete, and the breathing followed me, not moving, not changing position, but staying exactly the same distance away, as if the sound itself was uncoiling through the air to reach me, feel me, taste me. I barely made it to the break room before I collapsed onto one of the plastic chairs and dry heaved into a paper bag, shaking uncontrollably, my hands refusing to let go of the flashlight, even though it had long since burned out. That night, I didn't clock out. I just left, drove home, locked the door, and sat in my bathtub fully clothed with all the lights on. I didn't sleep, but the next night, I came back. Something about the place pulls at you, not like a job or obligation, but like a tether, something invisible wrapping around your ankle and tugging when you try to walk away. Rick didn't say anything when I showed up. He just handed me a new sheet of manifests, nodded once, and disappeared into the back. The warehouse felt colder that night, the kind of cold that doesn't register on a thermometer, but sinks into your bones anyway. I tried to stay busy, but the noise started early rustling from the high shelves, like something with too many legs was moving just out of sight, boxes shifting on their own, and a soft, wet thump from somewhere near aisle 9 every few minutes. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was back there. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the paranoia, maybe whatever was in that place was wearing me down piece by piece like waves against a cliff. But I found myself standing in front of the door again, fingers brushing the flap, the flashlight steady now in my grip. I told myself I wouldn't look at it. I just wanted to listen, learn, understand. I pushed the flap aside and stepped in. The temperature dropped instantly. The lights overhead were on, but dimmed to a sickly green, and every shelf looked older than the rest of the warehouse, like they'd been there long before anything else was built around them. Dust hung in the air like mist, and the further in I walked, the quieter everything got. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of suffocating silence you get inside a sealed tomb. Then I heard the breathing again, louder now, rhythmic, patient, and this time I knew exactly where it was coming from. I turned the corner at the midpoint of the aisle and froze. There, standing at the far end of the corridor, half lit in the dull glow of a flickering exit sign, was a figure, too tall to be human. Skin like stretched parchment. No face, just folds of pale, wet flesh hanging where features should be. And it was breathing. Not through a mouth or nose, but through its entire body, like a sponge inhaling water. I didn't look directly at it, but I saw enough in the corners of my eyes to know that it was staring at me, or rather, something inside, it was aware of me. It didn't move, but the space between us began to shorten, not because it was walking, but because the aisle itself was bending, stretching, drawing us together. I stumbled back, whispering to myself, repeating the rule, don't look, don't look, don't look, but I could feel its presence swelling behind my eyes, pressing against my thoughts like a tide of rot. I turned and ran, not just out of the aisle, but out of the warehouse entirely. I didn't clock out again. I didn't even grab my keys. I ran until I was 4 blocks away, collapsed on the curb, and sobbed like a child until dawn. When I finally went back to get my car, it was already parked out front. Rick handed me the keys. "You went in," he said. I nodded, ashamed. "Did you look at it?" I shook my head. He seemed to weigh something in his mind, then finally said, "Then you still have a chance." A chance at what? I didn't know, but I took the keys and left without saying another word. The dream started after, that always the same. The aisle, the breathing, the figure. But in the dream, it never stops walking, and it always catches me. I wake up with my sheets soaked and the sound of rattling breath echoing in my ears. I keep telling myself I should quit, should run, should burn the place down, and never look back. But deep down, I know it wouldn't matter. The warehouse is in me now, like it left a mark I can't see. And worst of all, I know I'm going to go back. Because the rules aren't just meant to protect you from what's in the warehouse. They're meant to protect what's inside the warehouse from remembering who it used to be. Because that's what I felt when I stood in front of it. Not malice, not hunger, but memory, like it recognized something in me. Something I didn't know I'd lost. Something that belongs to it now. And every time I close my eyes, I feel aisle 9 getting closer. I thought I could handle it. Thought if I just followed the rules and kept my head down, I'd be fine. But the warehouse doesn't work like that. It's not a place you clock into and out of. It's a place that clocks into you. And once it knows you've seen past its surface, it starts letting you see more, whether you want to or not. And after what I saw in aisle 9, I should have run. I know that now. I should have disappeared, changed my name, anything, but I didn't. I kept showing up, telling myself if I kept the rules, I'd be safe, like they were some magic ward against whatever ancient rot lives between those concrete slabs. And for a while, things even felt normal again, or at least that's what I kept telling myself, like some desperate affirmation. If I said it enough, it might become true. And I tried to live like it had all been a nightmare. A weird hallucination brought on by stress or sleep deprivation or some gas leak in the building. But even as I filled out checklists and dragged pallets from one loading bay to the next, I could feel it there, watching, waiting, patient, always just behind whatever I wasn't looking at. And then came the night someone touched forklift 13. His name was Alejandro, new guy. Maybe 19, maybe 20, skinny kid with tattoos up his arms, and a cigarette always hanging off his lip. The kind who laughed at the rules, called them boomer ghost stories, and dared the rest of us to bet against him. Rick had warned him. Of course, handed him the same laminated sheet of rules I got. the same look in his eyes like he was handing over someone's will. But Alvaro didn't care. Cracked jokes about ghost forklifts and haunted aisles, and said if anything spooky showed up, he'd just run it over. And when Rick didn't respond, just stared at him like someone already grieving. I felt my gut twist, but I said nothing, because maybe some part of me wanted to see what would happen too, if someone pushed past the rules and survived. That night, Alvaro found the forklift in the back corner of the warehouse, behind an old wire cage no one had touched in years, and to be fair, it didn't look different from the others, just a little rustier, maybe, a little too clean under the wheels, like it had never been used or had just been cleaned far too recently. And he climbed on, whistling some pop song as he cranked the ignition, and for a second, nothing happened. But then it started. No sputter, no delay, just a smooth, immediate engine hum like it had been waiting. And I remember how everyone froze at once, Rick dropping his coffee cup, one of the other guys swearing under his breath, and me standing there, clipboard in hand, every hair on my body prickling, because the forklift didn't sound right. It wasn't just the engine. It was the way the sound moved, like it echoed inward instead of out, like the growl of it was folding into itself, low and wet and wrong. And then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. But not 3 times. Not yet. The other forklifts shut off automatically. Every single one. A safety sure Rick later claimed didn't exist. And then Alvaro laughed, revved the engine, and said he was taking it for a spin. The moment he touched the controls, the forklift jolted forward, hard, like it wanted to go. And it didn't stop, not even when he eased off the throttle. It didn't stop when he let go of the wheel. Either it turned on its own, sped up, weaving between aisles, like it knew the layout better than any of us, like it had done this before. Alvaro started screaming, not playful yelling, not macho bravado actual screams, desperate, terrified, clawing at the wheel, his feet kicking off the floorboard as if trying to jump. But he couldn't. He was stuck to it, or it to him, and the thing just kept going, faster and faster, until it slammed into the back wall so hard that the entire building seemed to shudder. We all ran to the crash, hearts pounding, and when we got there, the forklift was still running. Wedged halfway into the concrete, Alvaro slumped in the seat, his eyes wide open and mouth frozen mid-scream, but no sound came out. His chest wasn't moving. Blood was leaking from his ears, and the wheel was still turning, slow now, lazy, like it was satisfied. Rick was the first to speak, just one sentence, "Get away from it," and we all backed off without question, every instinct screaming to listen. The lights flickered once, twice, and we waited, breath held, praying the third wouldn't come, and it didn't not that night. Alvaro was declared dead on site by the EMTS, cause of death officially listed as cerebral hemorrhage due to mechanical trauma. But everyone who was there knows he died before the crash, that the impact was just a formality, that something in that forklift drained him before he ever hit the wall. After the body was removed, Rick had the forklift pushed back to its corner by 2 guys who didn't speak English, didn't ask questions, didn't even seem curious, like they were hired just for this one task. When it was locked back behind the cage, Rick welded the door shut himself, sealing it in. But I noticed something when I passed it later, something subtle and terrifying. The wheel had moved. It had turned slightly to the left, and the keys weren't in the ignition anymore. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. I started hearing the forklift engine in my dreams, not loud, but just enough to know it was there, purring behind walls, beneath my bed, beneath the floor, and every morning I'd wake up with oil on my fingertips, dark smears I couldn't explain. The next shift I tried to ignore it all, focus on paperwork, play music loud enough in my earbuds to drown out the creaks and murmurs the warehouse made after midnight. But when I passed by the office Rick was in, I saw something strange. He had a map of the warehouse laid out on the desk, a real blueprint, but parts of it were blacked out. Huge X's drawn in thick marker over some sections, and beside the forklift cage, he'd written 3 numbers, 13, 26, 39. When he saw me looking, he slammed the folder shut, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Stop wandering. Stay where the light is." I nodded and backed away, but my curiosity was bleeding into something worse now, something ravenous. Later that night, I snuck into the server room, where the security feeds looped endlessly, and I started scanning the footage from the night Alvaro died. Most of it was corrupted black screen, static, or frozen frames, but one camera caught something. In the final 5 seconds before the crash, the forklift didn't just veer into the wall. It disappeared for a frame, literally vanished from the feed, and when it reappeared, it was already halfway through the concrete, like it had clipped through reality itself. But worse than that, there was something sitting in the seat with Alvaro, something tall, skeletal, arms draped around him like a puppeteer's strings. I paused it there and stared for a long time, then deleted the footage. Not to hide it, but because I couldn't let anyone else see it. Because if they saw it, it would see them back. Since then, no one's mentioned Forklift 13. It's still back there, I assume, but no one checks. No one talks about it, and everyone avoids that corner like it's radioactive. Rick doesn't look me in the eyes anymore. I think he knows the warehouse has started paying attention to me, that it's testing me, or maybe grooming me. And I've started noticing other things too, like how some of the boxes on the manifest don't exist physically, or how certain aisles change numbers when you're not looking, or how I sometimes hear footsteps in the ceiling, pacing, pacing, pacing. One night I found a clipboard on my station that I didn't put there. It had only one thing written on it in red ink. You moved it. That's all. No explanation, no signature. Just those 3 words. I haven't touched a forklift since. I don't clock in or out anymore. Either I just come and go. Time doesn't behave normally in there. I've watched hours pass in minutes and minutes stretch into eternities, but I can't leave. Not yet. Because part of me needs to know what the warehouse wants, what it's feeding, what those rules were really meant to contain. And every night, I hear the engine again, faint, distant, but growing louder. It's not running anymore. It's waiting. There's something about repetition that breaks you down, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, even and after a while. The long nights in the warehouse all started to blur together, like layers of grime on a window you can't quite see through anymore. But you know something is standing behind it, watching, always watching, and somewhere deep in your gut, you know it's been watching long before you ever walked through that front gate. I used to count the shifts to keep my sanity, but now I've lost track, not because I forgot, but because the calendar doesn't seem to match anymore, like time inside the warehouse runs on a different clock, a deeper rhythm that doesn't care about sunrises or Mondays or your fragile little human routine. That became clearer the night I saw the 3rd shift arrive. Up until then, I thought it was just us, me, Rick, a few night workers who kept quiet and followed the rules, and occasionally some fresh meat who'd vanish after a week or two, either shaken or silent, or both. But that night, something changed. I had just finished stacking a shipment in the south corridor, the one near aisle 9, but not close enough to draw its attention, when I noticed the temperature had dropped again, not just chilly, but dead. That awful, sucking cold like walking into a meat locker, carved into the side of a glacier. I remember pausing to rub my hands, then realizing I couldn't see my own breath, even though I could feel the frost sinking into my bones. That's when the first figure walked by silent, smooth, dressed in the same company uniform we all wore. But wrong. There was no face, just a blur. A smear of features like someone had pressed their thumb into wet paint on a photograph. And the way it walked didn't make any sound. No footfalls, no creaks of boot rubber against the concrete. And yet it moved like it belonged there, like it had always belonged. I ducked behind a pallet and watched as it passed down aisle 5, then turned left toward the forklifts and vanished. I stayed there for 20 minutes, crouched and shivering, not from cold anymore, but from something else, something primal that told me I had just seen something that shouldn't be, something that wasn't made the way we're made. When I finally had the nerve to stand up, I heard more footsteps, softer this time, more deliberate, like they wanted to be heard. I turned and saw a line of them, more of the same faceless workers, marching single file out from a side door I'd never noticed before. A door that wasn't on any of the warehouse maps, not even the blueprint Rick had blacked out. They walked like they were on a loop, robotic, hypnotized, and then one of them stopped dead in its tracks and turned its head toward me. I don't know how I knew it was looking, because it didn't have eyes, not really, but I felt it, like a spotlight of ice on the back of my neck. In that moment, I saw something inside its face move, like something behind a curtain pressing outward, struggling to get through. I didn't scream, I didn't run, I just backed away, one slow step at a time. As I did, it turned back around and continued walking, vanishing through a wall, yes, through it, as if the concrete was nothing more than a suggestion. I went straight to the security room, breathing hard, hands shaking, and I pulled up every live feed I could, but none of the cameras showed anything aisle after aisle empty, the side wall untouched, the entire warehouse still. And then I noticed something. The feeds had stopped timestamping. No date, no hour, just a blinking red dot. That's when I heard the voice, not from the speakers, not from a walkie, but from the room itself, a low, gravelly murmur like dry leaves rubbing together, and it said, "They're here now. You're not supposed to see them." I turned around, and no one was there. I stayed in that room until the end of my shift, or what I thought was the end, because my phone stopped updating, and the wall clock had started spinning, literally spinning, hands moving like they were being dragged in circles by invisible strings. When I finally left the warehouse, it was still dark outside. No cars on the road, no birds, no wind. Just an unnatural stillness that felt like the world had stopped turning. The next night, I cornered Rick before the others arrived and asked him about the third shift. His face went pale, not surprised, just resigned, like he'd been waiting for the question. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the floor, then finally said, "They're not employees. They're leftovers." I didn't understand. Leftovers from what? I asked. From before, he said. From when this place was something else. He told me, in fragments and whispers, about the warehouse's origin, not built, but converted, repurposed from something buried, something sealed long ago that was never meant to be reopened, and that the rules were designed not to protect us from the warehouse, but to keep us from waking up the ones inside it. The third shift, he explained, was what happened when people broke the rules and didn't die, they changed, got rewritten. Like the warehouse couldn't kill them, so it absorbed them instead. That's why you'll start seeing them now, Rick said, because you've seen too much. Just pretend you don't. That's all you can do. That same night, I went to the break room to sit with my thoughts, but someone was already there. A woman, uniform, hair tied back, no name tag. She looked up at me and smiled, and something about her face was off, like her skin didn't quite fit the bones underneath, and her smile was too still, like it had been drawn on. "You're new," she said. I told her I wasn't. "Not to the job," she said. "To them." She stared past me at the hallway, eyes fixed on nothing, and whispered, "They'll let you in now. The walls are thin at night." When I turned back, she was gone. I started noticing things after that. Shadows where no light could cast them. Footprints leading into walls. Voices on the PA system in languages that don't exist. The third shift walks freely now, sometimes passing me without flinching, sometimes stopping to tilt their heads as I pass, like they're waiting for me to make the wrong move. and I can feel it, like a presence hanging from the rafters. Something huge, something ancient, awake now, restless. I've started losing time blacking out during tasks, waking up in parts of the warehouse I've never entered before. My clipboard full of notes I didn't write, notes like aisle 26 doesn't end, and stop counting doors, and once, in thick black ink, IT is looking through you. I haven't seen Rick in days. His office is locked, the lights always off. The third shift is larger now, more of them every night, dressed like us, but hollow, walking their loops like puppets with broken strings. I saw one of them in the mirror, behind me, but when I turned, nothing was there, and when I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was gone. The warehouse is bleeding into something else. Or maybe it always was something else, and the job was just a mask at war to keep feeding. And me? I think I'm changing too. I don't dream anymore. I don't blink. I haven't eaten in 3 days, but I don't feel hunger. I just feel cold. And the lights flicker every time I walk past aisle 9 now, even if I don't look in. Last night, I saw a note taped to my locker. It said, "Welcome to the third shift." No handwriting. Just black ink, smeared, wet like it had just been written. I know what it means. I'm almost there. I can feel the warehouse pulling me in, unraveling me strand by strand. And maybe that's what this story really is. Not a warning, not a confession, but a chronicle of someone disappearing into the cracks of a place that was never meant to be understood. If you ever get hired here, if the money looks too good, the hours too quiet, remember this. There aren't just 3 shifts. There are more, many more, and some of them never end. I don't know why I broke the rule. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe madness. Maybe the warehouse finally wore me down like water-wearing stone, patient and relentless. But I broke it, and now I know what waits on the other side. And it's worse than anything I ever imagined. Worse than the thing in aisle 9, worse than forklift 13, or the third shift, or the voice that whispered my name from inside the walls. Because once you break a rule, really break one, you don't just see the warehouse. You see what the warehouse is built on, what it's feeding, what it's hiding, and it never lets you unsee it. It happened 3 nights ago. At least I think it was 3. Time's slippery here, like a dream you half remember. And for all I know, I've been trapped in this loop for days or months or longer. It started with the knocking again, the same 3 dull, deliberate knocks on the loading dock door at exactly 2:13 me. Just like that first night, like clockwork, like ritual. I'd heard them dozens of times since, always resisting the urge, always stepping away, always obeying. But that night, I didn't. I don't know what changed. Maybe it was because Rick was gone, and I hadn't seen anyone else for what felt like weeks. Maybe it was because the third shift had started standing still instead of walking, forming silent lines down the aisles like statues made of skin and memory, their heads tilted toward me in unison whenever I passed. Maybe it was because I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't seen daylight in so long. I'd forgotten what color the sky was. Or maybe I just wanted it to stop the whispers, the breathing, the growing sense that I wasn't working the night shift anymore, but living inside it, part of it, like the warehouse had absorbed me into its architecture. And I was just another fixture now, like a light that buzzes even when it's off. So when the knocks came, and I checked the wall clock and saw it click from 2:12 to 2:13, I walked toward the door, slowly, deliberately. The sound was louder than usual, heavier, like someone knocking with their whole body, and I swear the walls around the dock flexed with each impact, like the knock wasn't just at the door, it was in the building, of the building. My hand trembled as I reached for the latch. I remember thinking about the rule. Rule number 1, do not answer knocks on any door after 2:13. M. Simple, clear, absolute. And then I thought, what if the rule is the cage? What if it's not about protection, but containment? What if opening the door sets something free? Yes, But what if it also sets me free? That's how far gone I was. That's the kind of logic the warehouse infects you with. I undid the latch. The door creaked open about an inch, and just that sliver was enough to make my entire body recoil. There was no one there. Nothing but darkness. Not night darkness absence. A void. A perfect circle of black, stretching endlessly outward, swallowing the floodlight glow like it was ink dropped in water. I should have closed it. I should have turned and run. But I stepped through. Just 1 foot. Just enough for the black to touch me. It was cold, but not temperature cold. It was the cold of space, of forgetting, of death before birth. And the moment I crossed the threshold, the warehouse disappeared behind me. I mean, gone. No walls, no lights, no floor. Just that thick, living darkness and the sound of something breathing not far away, wet, dragging, ancient. I took another step, and the ground beneath my foot changed from concrete to something soft and spongy. Like moss, but it pulsed, and when I shone my flashlight down, I saw it wasn't ground. It was skin, pale, veined, trembling slightly with each breath. I was walking on something alive. And in that moment, I understood the truth. The warehouse was never just a building. It was grown, or perhaps it grew itself, layer by layer over something else, something buried, something enormous and half sleeping, like a seed that dreams in hunger. And me, Rick, Benny, Alvaro, the third shift, we were just nerves, tiny cells keeping it fed, keeping it entertained. And the rules weren't just rules. They were neural impulses, signals in its brain, to stop us from waking it up too soon. I kept walking, because at that point, what else was there to do? And eventually, I saw the source of the breathing. A mouth, the size of a shipping container, wet and glistening, embedded into the flesh of the floor. It didn't open or close. It just inhaled eternally, drawing air and thought and memory into its depth. Around it were objects, crates, papers, old uniforms, all spinning slowly in the air as if suspended in jelly. I saw Rick's name tag among them, bent and bloodstained. I saw Benny's lighter. I saw my own face, reflected in something smooth and metallic. And behind me in the reflection was something wearing my body, smiling with teeth too long, too thin. I ran, or tried to, but the hallway shifted, stretched, curled inward. Suddenly, I was back in aisle 9, but it wasn't aisle 9 anymore. It was deeper, darker, a mirror of it, with shelves filled with things that moved when I looked away, boxes that whispered, lights that turned on before I touched the switch. The third shift was there too, waiting, motionless. And then, for the first time, they moved not toward me, but aside, parting like curtains. And something stepped through. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. It had my height, my face, my uniform, but its eyes were wrong. Too many, too wide. And its smile stretched ear to ear, like someone had torn it open with wire. It whispered, "You broke a rule." And I felt the warehouse shudder around me, not in anger, but in excitement. It had been waiting for someone to do it, for someone to set the process in motion. And now that I had, it didn't need to pretend anymore. It didn't need the rules. It didn't need doors or walls or forklifts or time clocks. It just needed me. I blacked out after that, I think. Or maybe I was pulled somewhere deeper. But when I came to, I was sitting at my desk in the break room. Everything looked normal. The clock read 2:11 a.m. My clipboard was on the table. My boots were clean. The door was closed. The rules were back on the wall, laminated, untouched. But something is different. I know I'm not the same. I feel it inside me, like my thoughts aren't all mine anymore, like something else is breathing with me. When I close my eyes, I see that mouth. I feel that floor skin pulsing under me, and I hear the knock again. Always 3 knocks, always at 2:13. And the worst part, I want to open it again. I want to go back, because whatever I let in, it's still hungry. And now, so am I. If you're hearing this, if you've ever thought about working night shifts alone, about ignoring strange rules or doubting stories, you weren't meant to hear listen to me. Don't. Don't take the job. Don't answer the knock. Don't break the rules. Because once you do, you don't leave the warehouse. The warehouse leaves you.